Hello and welcome back to Neuroblast Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Dawson, and today we're going to be going over the senses and the power of the senses and the sense of touch. Just to kind of keep you guys updated on what I've been up to, I just started a new mobile chiropractic business where I do adjustments and we facilitate yoga sessions with breathwork out in nature. So if you'd like to learn more about that, go check out my website at drryandawson.com and read a little bit about the healing and harmony that's been going on out here in California. And if you'd like to see if you are a candidate for that type of care, you can book yourself a complimentary consultation with me, and we'll discuss what's going on and see if that's something we can facilitate. But I really appreciate those of you that have been tuning in and giving me your feedback, because it's very encouraging. Sometimes I wonder if I'm supposed to be doing this, or if anybody really wants to hear my content. So that is just something that I really appreciate, and I thank you guys for staying on top of me and keeping me going, because you guys inspire me. The whole reason I'm doing this podcast is facilitate conversations. I do plan on bringing on some experts on different topics once we are able to get everybody rounded up and teamed up. So if that's something that you guys would be open to, let me know. And we can bring you on the show. We can talk about brain health. We can talk about mental health. We can talk about pretty much anything, because whenever we relate our lives back to a single unit, it comes down to our brain and our nervous system. So a direct reflection of how we're feeling is how healthy our brain is behaving and how well we're taking care of it. So, we're not only talking about our thoughts, but what are we exposing ourselves to? What are we putting into our body, and how are we using it? We know that these are the factors that determine our brain's ability to rewire itself and in which way it's doing so. So are we having a positive or a negative neuroplasticity today? With what we're doing, with what we're talking about, with who we're working with, the behaviors that we're going to conduct, and the actions that we're going to go out and do, and the words that we're going to say, and everything that we're going to let come into our world, is that going to have a positive or a negative growth pattern in our brain? So neuroplasticity is one of the main topics of this podcast. And if we go back and we look what neuroplasticity is, that's our brain's ability to rewire itself. Now, it's going to do that no matter what. It's going to do that either by reinstilling old pathways and making them stronger. So in the sense that, if we have a dirt road, well, basically we're going to go put gravel on that now. Or we're moving the gravel out of the way and we're laying down some concrete. And it's like, wow, now all of a sudden we took an old pattern and we just made it permanent. And so that's why a lot of these actions and a lot of these behaviors that we have and that we've adapted to over our life, and some of these things, could be from the earliest stages of our patterns. These recognition patterns of how we respond to not only visual stimuli, but whenever we reach out and we touch something as a baby. And before we even have the ability to really see that well, we're already feeling the world around us. If you look into a baby's eyes and you put your finger into their hand, they'll grab your hand. It's a reflex. And because of that reflex, the brain is intaking information on how does this feel in my hand? How warm is this? How cold is this? What's the texture like? But what is texture? Texture is the ability to interpret multiple senses at once. So it's still the sense of touch, but is it vibrating? Is it rippling? How far apart are these 2 points that I'm touching on my thumb from each other? Our sense of touch is so acute that many of these receptors are micrometers away from each other. So our ability to interpret things just by our sense of touch, we can literally see with our hands. And that's one of the coolest things about chiropractic is that's what we're doing. We're interpreting what's going on based on what the patient says to us and what the history is. And we take in these other factors like diagnostic imaging or functional lab ranges or orthopedic testing, muscle testing, nervous system testing. All these things are great bits of information that when we compile that information together, and then we use our sense of touch to go in and appreciate what the body is displaying, because sometimes our ability to feel what's going on inside of us is really subjective. It's based on that person's ability to be aware of themselves. So if this isn't something that you practice, then you're not going to have an as acute sense of how you're feeling. We have this ability to be in touch with our own body and in touch with what's going on around us by being empathetic and being aware. And so whenever we become more aware, we pay more attention, we're able to feel more. And so this takes practice. This takes lots of practice. Just like being able to speak, just like being able to interpret what objects are in front of me. My eyes have to learn to recognize those things. And then our brain goes ahead and computes it all together. Now, the amazing thing about our sense of touch is that we have this ability all over our body to not only pick up UV radiation and heat, but to pick up chemical stimuli. If a bug's crawling on me, if the wind blows, our hair follicles have little tiny spring-like neurons that wrap around the base of them. So when the wind blows over the top, that little hair follicle bends. And then what happens? That bending causes a mechanical change in movement in that receptor. And that receptor then has a action potential stimuli that once it moves so much, it causes a threshold to just cascade over, right? It crosses that threshold and it cascades. That action potential causes that neuron to fire. And then it goes all the way up your arm. Say it starts in the hand, goes up the radial nerve, and then up your arm, through the shoulder, and then all the way into your cervical spine and back into the spinal cord, and then it goes up. But before it gets to your cortex and you start making sense of all this stuff, it has to go through what's called a reticular formation. And the reticular formation is really cool. It's kind of like the guardian to the brain. And what it does is it sifts out information. So if this information is at pain, or if it doesn't pleasure, or if it doesn't really have any benefit to, or based on what your brain is interpreting as beneficial or important for your survival, then it's going to kind of sift that out. And then it goes to the thalamus, and the thalamus kind of tells it where to go, which part of the cortex to go to. So almost every single sense, except for the sense of smell, goes through this thalamus, this thalamic cortical tract. And so basically, the sense of smell is very special because it has the ability to kind of just blow right past that. And that's why, whenever you smell like a flower, it might take you right back into a memory, because that system, that pathway, the olfactory pathway, is directly connected to your limbic system and being able to associate smells with memories and even facial recognition. So you might see someone's face pop into your head whenever you have a certain smell, and it reminds you of that person. And then what happens? We have a thought of that person and it leads to another thought. Maybe it's a heartbreak. Maybe, that heartbreak leads to anguish because you're sad about the way things ended with that person, or things didn't work out. Or maybe it was a job. Maybe it was a career. Maybe it was just something that did not work out for you. And every time a smell, or every time you hear a song, or every time that one little area of your brain gets lit up, it causes a cascade reaction, right? When these are just lined up neurons where they go from one memory to the next. And it's like, man, why is it every single time that I have this thought, it leads to all these other thoughts? And the next thing I know, I'm sitting there for 10 minutes and I've just wasted time thinking about the same old thing that no longer serves me, that doesn't bring me any kind of pleasure. And in fact, the only thing that it does is hold me back from being into this present moment and creating new experiences for myself. So literally by holding on to some of these memories, and sometimes, it's not that we're holding on. It's like I said, these things are automatic, because once we keep doing this and we don't have some kind of interruption, some kind of break in the system where we kind of just step in there and we take what's already there and we shake it up. It's not that we're going to remove memories. We're never going to remove memories, but we can change the way that we look at the memory and the approach and the pathway in which we get to that neuron. We can build new connections around it and take a different perspective on an old problem, giving us the ability to get back into the moment and have a new experience. And that feels good, knowing that we can accept where we're at, add in a new stimuli to a same old pathway, and all of a sudden, man, we're doing a lot better and we're more productive. We're able to get back into that moment, like I said, and get back in touch with ourselves. Everything in the universe and everything, in my opinion, whenever I've studied a lot of neuroscience and I've studied the body for, majority of my life now, and I love physics, and I'm starting to think that almost everything begins with a sense of touching, a sense of whether it's one vibration touching another, one matter touching another matter, or energy touching another energy, or maybe say it's like the photoreceptors in our eyes, the rods. So you have a photon of light coming all the way from our sun, and it hits that rod in the back of your eye. And sometimes it only takes a single photon to cause that hyperpolarization in those rod receptors and causes them to, like I said, hyperpolarize and send that action potential and create a response in that nerve and a stimulus that goes to the brain and says, hey, there's something to look at here. There's some light around. We can see, we can interpret. And it's amazing. And we go back to the olfactory senses and how whenever we smell something, we walk outside and we smell those roses out in the garden. It's like, man, that just smells amazing. But sometimes it only takes one little molecule of that compound to enter into your nose and act on that receptor for you to, and like I said, it's touching that receptor. The molecule goes in and it touches your olfactory nerves inside of your nose, and it causes a threshold stimulation where that action potential results in a little wave that goes down the neuron, and then that leads to other neurons and it connects itself, and that's where we have those formulation of different memories. And our brain is like this really cool computer. And I think that when we look at computers and we think about like AI and AI becoming conscious, I think there's a certain point where consciousness is almost a byproduct. Okay, now I'm going out on a limb here, and I'm just kind of talking based on, my own experiences. This isn't anything that I've, found in any kind of scientific literature. But in my opinion, based on where I'm at today and what I've been studying, what I think consciousness is a byproduct of enough overlapping systems within a single computer or program that can examine all those different laws of physics and nature and the environment around it. So if we had a computer that could integrate multiple tools at one time, if it has the ability to integrate that, then it becomes conscious, because then you're experiencing sight, smell, vibration, and the sense of touching. What's going on with the air around me? What's this feel like whenever this person touches me? Because I'm looking at that person, and maybe it causes an emotional reaction just by seeing their face. Maybe it's good or bad. And then when they touch you, that causes that emotion to get even more intense. Even though the act of touching your arm or touching your hand or putting your hand on their shoulder or whatever is the same mechanical mechanism in which something else is touching that area, right? So you could have there was a study actually where they blindfolded people and they took heterosexual males and they showed them videos of a woman touching them on the leg and then a man coming over and touching them on the leg while they're blindfolded, and looked at their brain and showed that they had a much higher spike in their amygdala whenever the males were touching, because they're just like, they didn't like that, right? And the weird part was, this was on video, they were seeing this, right? But the weird part was, the whole time, it was always a woman touching. So even though the mechanical stimulus is the same whenever we're being touched, we cannot decipher the emotional connection made with that touch. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And that's part of being conscious. That's part of being aware of ourself and realizing that we don't have to react to every single thing that, looks at us, every single thing that says something wrong to us. We don't have to react to that. Those are just words. Those words are just vibrations that are rippling into my ear, going down the canal, hitting the tympanic membrane and vibrating through the inner ear ossicles and going down and causing my cranial nerve 8, the little ciliary hairs on the end of these neurons, to bend and move. And whenever they bend and move, they pick up the ability for us to detect where our head is at in space. So not only do our ears give us the ability to feel what's coming in as far as sound waves and interpret those into messages, but it also gives us the ability to feel where we're at in space. So our orientation with our body and the universe, are we upside down? Is my head turning this way? Am I looking that way? And I just think these abilities are really interesting. And that little area in there is called the semicircular canals. They're really cool to study, and there's 3 of them, and they're orientated on each plane of axis perfectly, the X, Y, and Z axis. So as we change position, like a gyroscope, it's able to detect that change in pressure, and then these little hairs start to move, and that sends a signal through that threshold, once again, through those action potentials into the brain, telling us, hey, this is where we're at in space. And this whole pathway is called the vestibular ocular pathway, and being able to use our inner ears to actually tell us where we're at in position with the world. And it's kind of interesting. It's really interesting, but it began with a sense of touch. The angle in which that head is positioned allows for this endolymph material to move throughout those canals and brush on those little hairs, much like the hairs on your arm that we talked about earlier, to move and cause an action potential that gives information to your brain. And so all this information coming in, what do we do with it all? Because like I said, thank goodness we have this reticular formation in our brainstem that allows us to sift through some of this. Because if not, we wouldn't have enough memory drive, we don't have enough RAM, we don't have enough capacity to intake all the information that our body is actually sending to our brain in this moment right now. In this moment right now. We sift through that and it down-regulates itself. A lot of it becomes negative and inhibitory because it's just, we know nothing's wrong. The temperature in the room's fine, so we don't really need to worry about that right now. We have different sensors all over our body. The carotid sinus in our neck. These are visceral receptors that actually can gauge blood pressure changes, baroreceptors. Being able to change blood pressure and gauge that is very important to be able to deliver nutrients to where we need, back to the brain and to the different areas of the body that, depending on what we're doing, if we're working out or if we are running from a bear, we might need more oxygen to some areas like our muscles and not so much in our digestive system at that time. So being able to gauge that pressure is very important. The carotid body, also found in the neck, gauges pH balance and our different blood gases. So all these things start with a sense of touch and expansion, and the mechanical receptors, the chemical receptors, all these things start with a sense of something touching something else. And whenever that happens, it sends these signals all at once to the brain. And the brain's like, man, I'm in a room right now, hungry, and I can feel that my stomach is growling and my GI tract is like, all right, where's the food? Where's the food? And all these things are coming in. And I still have to focus on the test that I'm taking. So how do we do this? How do we keep our brains functioning to the point where we can have all this external stimuli coming in and still function the way we need to? Well, part of it is not trying to multitask. Because whenever you multitask, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm a multitasker, I get a lot more things done at once. The thing is, our brains don't really work like that. From a chemical standpoint, biochemical standpoint, every single thought, every single train of thought requires a different pathway. And whenever you use that pathway, you're exhausting certain neurotransmitters. So if you are jumping from doing laundry to making coffee to doing the dishes and cycling back through that for some reason, and all while you're, cooking something over in the corner and trying to multitask, right? Well, every time you break that concentration, every time you move on to the next task, that actually requires your brain to kind of start over, because technically our brains can't really think about multiple things at once. It can compute multiple things at once, but consciously we can't think about multiple things at once. And so we can't think about what not to do, right? Our brain doesn't know what it means to not do something. So we got to think about what we want to do, and then we set a goal. We go out and attack that goal with commitment and drive. And that drive comes from an area in our brain called the prefrontal cortex, and our ability to be distracted and still make the necessary adjustments to get our goals done. Now, a problem with today is a lot of us have downregulated our prefrontal cortex, and it makes it really hard to pay attention. It makes it really hard to get our goals done. And part of it is because of what I just said there in our ability to multitask and this need to try and do everything at once and get multiple things done at once. You're writing an email while making coffee, and it's like all these things cause your brain to kind of go into this overload mode. And so taking more time, getting up earlier, and organizing your thoughts and not distracting yourself every single time that you have a thought or a worry or your anxiety comes up or your depression comes up because of some old thing that pops in your head, maybe while you're folding laundry, and then you go grab your phone and you start distracting yourself. What happens when we do that is we're reinstilling that negativity. We're reinstilling that negative reaction instead of building a new one, because we're going into this distraction mode instead of working on it. I think a lot of us need to get back into, just doing daily chores, because we know that when we're doing this and we're kind of in that mode where you're folding laundry and you're thinking about your life, this lights up the area of the brain called the posterior cingulate cortex, which is known as the default mode network. And this default mode is what allows you to kind of think about your life while you're still on automated tasks. So like if you're driving to work, but you don't remember how you got there, that's because your default mode network was in full flow right there. It's a primary hub in the brain, and it is highly metabolic. And whenever we're thinking about where we want to go with our life, what we're supposed to do, or we're reminiscing, this area of the brain is very active. And so whenever we're thinking about those things, that allows us to go and use that prefrontal cortex to work on our planning. But we're so overstimulated today. We're so overstimulated with cell phones and emails and marketing, and every time you walk outside, somebody's hitting you up. and your phone's constantly going off, there's just this overstimulation that kind of makes us subconsciously more anxious because we're on the lookout all the time for, other information coming in. And this causes our brain to feel anxious because it's like, okay, am I missing anything? And we have to get back to being in the moment, kind of reconnect with that childhood version of ourselves that is just there, experiencing, taking in that information. It's kind of like whenever a kid jumps up on the coffee table and he feels like Superman, and he's just like having this amazing feeling like he could just do anything. And then the parent comes over and says, get off that coffee table. You're going to hurt yourself, or you're going to break the table. And all of a sudden this kid goes from feeling like amazing Superman to, wait, what am I doing wrong here? Oh, I have to be careful of this, and this. And over time, we keep throwing in those constructs into children's minds. And by the time we're adult, we're looking around for danger everywhere. And we're constantly subjected to all this negative material in our social media. And a lot of the things that we see on TV are just kind of negative. And, it's crazy to me whenever I do watch TV nowadays and I look at some of these commercials, just how raunchy, I don't know if that's a technical term, but how raunchy TV's gotten, And it's just, we're exposing ourselves to too many things that can cause negative neuroplasticity in our mind that doesn't serve us, that doesn't allow us to go out and accomplish our dreams and allow us to stay in touch with ourselves. So we have to be careful what we expose ourselves to and who we expose ourselves to, and being able to surround ourselves with the right people that are going to mirror that positive energy around us. Now, everybody's going to have a bad day. Everybody's going to have those days where you're just kind of feeling low and down in the dumps, and it's just like, man, whatever. Embrace those days too. I love my sad days now because I know once I do embrace that moment and I go and get outside and I breathe in that fresh air and I appreciate just the simple fact that I have the ability to stand in the sunshine for one more day, it's like all these happy endorphins rush in. And I kind of break that pattern on that old pathway where originally before I would just kind of distract myself, but now I accept it and I step right up to the plate and I go and do some yoga and I get outside and do a little workout and I do some breath work and I work my way through that. Sometimes I even have to let myself just have an emotional release, yell, cry, laugh, whatever you need to do to break that pattern, but don't shy away from it. Keep pushing through it. Keep going. Because I'm here for you, and I know other people are going to be around there for you too. So we have to be there for each other and know that whenever somebody's struggling, we were there too. And we're going to be there again. So it's important to encourage people. It's important to set time to actually do that and let the people know that are around you, those loved ones, your friends, your family, that they're amazing people. They're amazing creatures that have this nervous system and the ability to not only sense what's around us at such an acute level that we can stimulate those things on a micro nano scale with these neurons. That's how in touch we are with the universe. And we're here to not only be in touch, but we have the ability to talk to each other and connect on what we're feeling and what we're touching. Now, there's this just prescription that in our society that, we don't like to be touched. We don't like that. It's uncomfortable because it relates back to maybe what's going on the inside of that person, how healthy they are with themselves, how secure they are with their self, how they feel. And maybe so they're so out of touch with themselves that by you putting your hand on them, that just sends them into overload and causes them to cringe. And so what we have to do is get in touch with ourselves first. Become aware of where we're at. Become aware of how we're feeling. We have to heal ourselves before we can go out and heal anybody else. We have to fill our own cup up so that we can go out and pour it out for other people and spread that love around. It's nobody else's job to make us happy. It's no one else's job to breathe for us. It's no one else's job to make us feel secure. What we have to do is go out and get the life that we want, manifest the life of our dreams, And the only way we're going to do that is by breaking old patterns, reinstilling positive neuroplasticity, and getting back in touch with ourselves and the world around us. Because I think that a lot of our problems that we are consciously perceiving around us right now in this universe, whenever we look at our planet, we think about things like plastic accumulation. We think about climate change and just how fast this planet's starting to heat up, and all the forest fires and the CO2 emissions and from our cars, okay? And what we're eating, so all the methane emissions from all the animal products, from, the raising of cattle. All these things come back to the individual person and a thing called discipline, okay? So do you have the discipline to take a water bottle and throw it into the recycling? Do you have the discipline to maybe get a container or a flask that you can put water into and stop using water bottles altogether? Okay, if everybody had the discipline to do that, we would be able to annihilate this plastic problem. All right, what about CO2 emissions? Well, why don't we all just get onto our bikes or start walking a little bit more? Now, I know, I love road trips as much as the next person, but why do we need to, on a daily basis, release so many emissions into our atmosphere that we're breathing in? It's causing harm to not only our planet, but to our lungs and our brains. Okay? And then we look at the forest fires and being able to control and operate around those. It's like all these problems come back to the individual and our ability to listen to what's going on around us and be in tune with that and not ignore what is going on, not ignore this sense of touch that we have with our planet and the universe and each other. Stop trying to ignore that for personal gain or personal pleasure or personal anguish and taking an old pathway, and instead let's start building a new future for each other and building a more sustainable planet. Being more conscious of what we're eating. I'm not saying everybody needs to be vegan, but we don't need to be eating as much red meat as we are. We don't need to raise this many cattle. And by the time we get to 10 billion people, there's not going to be enough room to raise as much cattle as we are now and still have that many people eating that way. So in the future, we're going to have to change the way we're eating. And so all these problems tie into each other. They come back to the person and our narcissistic way of looking at our own lives, thinking that we need all this stuff. Whenever I was traveling for the last 2 months, I did almost 13,000 miles in the last 2 months. I went to over 30 national parks around the country, and especially through California, up into Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, all the way out to Missouri. And it was amazing. I slept in my car. I camped out. I put my head on a rock one night and just looked at the stars. And it's amazing to me how many, you go around, you see all these different fast food chains and hotel chains. That's like the majority of small town America is like these corporate businesses that it's just like been a cookie cutter approach on every single small town. And then you see these people, they pull over in a beautiful state like Utah where we could be camping out, looking at the clearest night sky in the world. But instead, we think that we need to go get that queen size mattress with the little, refrigerator next to it and watch our TV show and then wake up the next morning to that bad continental breakfast with the dried cereal and Pop-Tarts and like the old boiled eggs sitting in there that's been in there since, last week. Why do we need all that? First off, why do you want to pay money for that? And second off, you guys can do whatever you want with your money, but it just baffles me. We don't need all this stuff. And so once we get back to a minimalistic lifestyle and we realize how very little we need and how much is provided to us through our oxygen and through our body and our stimulation, we can go out and do a lot more work, require a lot less resources, and get a lot less distracted. We're getting back in touch with our nature. We're getting back in touch with ourselves and each other. And so this sense of touch, this sense of well-being goes way deeper than just vibration on my skin. And this is why the sense of touch has been so understudied. But ever since 1952, if you look at a chart, I can send you guys, just PM me on this and I'll send you the chart of anything I'm talking about is backed by this science that I'm looking at right here in my little journal I've kept. I've been studying and, I really like this stuff. But exponential growth. We look at since 1952, the publications on research about touch has been exponential. It's the fastest growing field in neuroscience. And who is the front of that field? Who has some of the most keen senses of touch in the world? Chiropractors. Have you ever been to a massage therapist or a chiropractor that is very conscious and in tune, and they can just put their hand on you and kind of find where the problem's at? So even though you might have told them something, sometimes you have patients that come in for a follow-up visit and their body's just displaying a certain way. We're able to subconsciously pick up on that through different patterns, maybe in the way they're walking and the way they're laying and the temperature on their skin, the muscle tone, their reflexes, and the movement pattern in which those joints and those muscles are able to extend and move. And being able to put your hand on somebody's back and feel that energy being stagnant and blocked right there, giving it a little help, taking a few deep breaths and a nice little push in the right direction, the body then is able to heal itself. So it's never like anybody that's actually rubbing on you or pressing on you that's healing you. It's not that. It's not fixing you. It's once the body is back into position and in a state that it can communicate better with itself, then the nervous system is flourishing, and all of a sudden these muscles can calm down. All of a sudden the lymphatic drainage in that area can move and allow new nutrients and white blood cells and inflammatories to get out. And so basically we're stimulating life into that area by removing blockages in our nervous system, promoting an endorphin release so we get a nice dopamine release afterwards. And I really think that the power of touch and the power of the body, when facilitated in the right environment, because that's what it's about. It's about the environment that we're in and that person receiving the healing, and not so much what the doctor or the chiropractor or whoever's working on you can do to you. It's about being in a receptive state so that our body can make the adjustment that it needs to go out and begin to thrive and heal itself. So anytime someone says that chiropractic is treating something, I kind of just shrug, because I think that we can always benefit from being checked for malposition and malalignment, right? Because if you are out of alignment, your body is not going to be able to communicate with itself as well. No matter what your sex, what your age, what your diagnosis is, what your race is, your body's going to be better at functioning if it's in better communication with itself. So if we can find areas in our nervous system and our spine, the primary canal in which the nervous system can communicate with the body, and remove areas of tension and areas of misalignment where energy gets stagnant, blood flow, nervous flow, lymphatic flow, all this energy gets stagnant and causes a homeostasis. If we can remove that, that gives that person another chance to adjust, recalibrate, and update their body and nervous system to go out and achieve whatever they need to do that day. Now, it doesn't mean you're fixed. It just means that you're in alignment for that position. Now, what you do in between those adjustments with your lifestyle is what's going to allow that to hold longer. So, breath work. A lot of us don't breathe. A lot of us, we hold our breath even in conversation or when we're driving or we see something that startles us. So being able to take deep breaths, getting oxygen back into those muscles, back into those joints, and back into those systems like the nervous system, blood system, getting all that back and allowing it to function allows us to feel good again. But not only that, we feel productive. We're getting a dopamine release. We're getting a pleasure sense because we just did something healthy for ourselves. The placebo effect is 20% productive. It works 20% of the time. Placebo. So if you give somebody a sugar pill and you tell them it's a blood pressure medication, 20% of the time, it's going to work. It's going to help lower their blood pressure. That's the power of the mind. And by using the body, using the power of the senses, we can actually override the mind and facilitate a healing endeavor that can cause catharsis, cause a paradigm shift, and cause a change in the way that we look at old problems and create a new energy wave that goes in and re-stimulates the mind in a different way and allows us to have almost a psychedelic experience, a mind manifesting experience. That's what psychedelic means. Psyche being mind, delos meaning manifesting. So we know that whenever we interpret the world through different eyes and we look at things through a different lens, that is truly mind manifesting. So therefore it is psychedelic. Everything about our life is psychedelic. Everything that we look at, everything we smell, everything we touch is what brings in that information, and we compute it together to become conscious. And by our ability to grow upon that consciousness and to be able to hack into other perspectives, when I'm looking at a leaf on the river, when I'm just sitting next to the riverbank up in beautiful Yellowstone National Park and I saw this leaf go by down the river, I kind of resonated with that leaf for a second. I knew what it was like to be a leaf on the river, just floating down the river of life, and I connected with that leaf. But then I looked over at my dog playing, and I connected with my dog. And I think that's one of the most special parts of being conscious and being human conscious, for our ability to jump into other things and other perspectives and see the world through their eyes. That's a truly special sense. And that's our sense of being in touch with our universe and being in touch with what's around us and being able to go out and make the adjustments that other things don't have the ability to make. It's our job to adjust ourselves, to adjust each other, and to adjust our lifestyle so that our overall compilation of all of our lifestyles together do not cause this world to suffer. So changing the way we eat, not being so needy, realize that we don't need all these things. A lot of these diagnoses that we have that hold us back are really just symptoms of a bigger issue and a deeper problem that we need to get down to. And so let's dive into it. Let's start doing the work. Like I said, I'm here for you guys. I really appreciate you guys being here for me and keeping me encouraged and staying on this path and getting the word out there about brain health and neuroplasticity and shedding new light on this topic, because I love science and I love education, but there's just not enough talk in the classroom about brain health and consciousness and biochemistry behind this, because a lot of medicine is just a neck down approach because the brain is so complex. It's kind of hard for us to even put it all together. But whenever we do, and we take our time and we start to look at all the different systems and how they overlap and how they form our consciousness and how they form our perspective on the world, we can really see with clear eyes that the problem is us. But this is a story of redemption. This isn't something that we're stuck in. We can help each other. And a lot of this change is happening right before our eyes. You can see it in this next generation. We can see it in the awareness that's growing with the fast communication of the advent of the internet and being able to spread these ideas faster than ever. It's amazing. And it's truly inspiring to see some of these younger kids changing the world for the better, because they know that what they're up against in the future is going to be tough because of this world that we've left for them. And so, we don't just inherit our earth from our ancestors, but we're borrowing it from our children. And so we got to make sure that we hand it off to them with a chance to live a happy life that's not going to be destructive and even more stressful on them. So we have to start recycling. We have to start getting out, riding our bikes and walking more. We don't need all this extra stuff to pamper our life, to make us feel better, because it doesn't work. What's gonna work is doing the work and getting down to business, doing some of those hard exercises, mental exercises, and stop distracting ourselves whenever we are in our default mood and allowing us to think about old issues and what we're planning and where we're going with our life. And then sometimes we just got to clear all that and get back into the moment, get back into the present, accept where we're at, accept our past, and know that what we do in this moment predicts who I am tomorrow. And what I do tomorrow is who I'm going to be in my future. But I change and I set those things in motion by what I say and what I do right now. And that's all that matters. And so we are forever and eternally encapsulated together in this eternal present moment. That's all we'll ever have together. And if we all act conscious and facilitate a life of sustainability together in the present moment, we can change the world and we can build a sustainable future for our children and watch our cultures and our societies grow and flourish at a faster rate than ever before. Thank you so much for tuning in again. If you guys have any feedback, please send it my way. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the sense of touch. I mean, this is a very deep topic, so we can go into this more on another podcast. I'd love to have you guys on, so if you guys ever want to do that, hit me up. Like I said, I'm Dr. Ryan Dawson, chiropractor and community health advocate out of Santa Cruz, California. You can go ahead and check out my website at drryandawson.com. And find us on Facebook at Dawson Chiropractic and Human Optimization. I'm also on Instagram under Dr. Ryan Dawson. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you have an absolutely beautiful day. You guys are amazing, stellar, cosmic family. I love you. I believe in you. Let's go out and have a great day. All right. Cheers.